We are still talking about boundaries and how to set healthy boundaries in your life. Okay, so to recap, first we talked about physical boundaries, then we talked about emotional boundaries, and then last time we talked about intellectual boundaries. Now, today, as we dig into the concept of setting sexual boundaries, I want you to keep those other three in mind because all those sexual boundaries are a separate thing that have to be dealt with and handled and set and all of that. They include portions of physical, emotional, and intellectual boundaries. So when you think about sexual boundaries, the first thing I want you to think about is this idea that consent matters. And consent matters even if you have been in a long-term committed relationship for years and years and years and years. It's still important to have consent for whatever actions are going to happen from a sexual perspective. But sexual boundaries go much bigger than that. It taps into the emotional aspect of how connected you may feel to your partner or whoever it is you're going to engage with in a sexual way. It might be that you need to feel that physical space boundary is a safe one, that you want to let someone into that bubble, that safety zone that you've created around yourself. You also want to make sure that you're both viewing the sexual experience the same way from an intellectual perspective. How do you view the connection? Is it a quick random hookup with someone? Or is this actually going to be something where we connect on all of the different levels? Because intimacy and sexuality, they are connected, but they're not necessarily the same thing. So when we talk about setting sexual boundaries, we want to make sure that we're also making space for the intellectual boundaries, the emotional boundaries, and the physical boundaries to be a part. Okay, the other thing I want you to think about is that sexual boundaries also include any touching that you do or don't want, deciding what you are and aren't okay with. If one person says yes and the other person says, I don't know, maybe, that's not a yes on both sides. Now, when we talk about consent, a lot of times people go, oh, that doesn't sound sexy. Consent doesn't sound like something I want to incorporate in what I've got going on. And I understand that you're not going to necessarily stop and go, okay, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Are we consenting to this activity? Now, if you do want to do that, knock it out, go for it, because I think the more consent you have, the better. But it is important to be able to check in. For example, let's say that you and your partner know that on a weekly basis, you try to have some sexy time. And maybe you get to Saturday afternoon and you're not feeling your best. It is okay to communicate that and say, look, I'm not feeling my best today. This may not be the best time to be sexual, but hey, could we take a rain check and come back to that a couple days from now when I am feeling a little bit better? The one thing I want you to keep in mind from a romantic relationship perspective is that when you're negotiating the terms of your sexual dynamic, it's not always going to feel like rainbows and butterflies and fireworks. That would be great. I wish there were a way that we could ensure that, but it's not necessarily reality to expect that. So you also have to keep in mind where your expectations and your boundaries are overlapping. It's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to have an expectation that, hey, I really wanted to be with my partner this Saturday, but that's not going to happen for some reason. I can express that disappointment without putting pressure on them to perform. I can express the disappointment by just saying, man, I was really looking forward to that. I love being with you. I enjoy our time together, and I hate to, miss that this week. And then you're also able to ask, hey, is there anything you do feel up to? Not in a pressury way, not in a way to say, hey, you owe me something, but in a way to be able to say, I really enjoy being with you and I'd like to find a way to make that happen. Or if not today, what works better for you? Could we sort of pencil that in for a few days from now? Anytime I talk about scheduling sexual time, when I'm working with couples, there's often a resistance to it because it sort of feels like it takes the spontaneity and the funness element out of it. But just like asking for consent, it's also important that you have some regular sexual occurring time. And by sexual, I don't always mean overt sexual. I don't always mean intercourse. I don't always mean it has to go fully to the extreme. It could just be that you're sharing some intimate cuddle time. It could be that you go back to those love languages of physical touch elements that we've talked about in the past past, and you go, okay, what are some things that I can pull from that would help me feel connected to my partner in this way? There is so much to say about sexual boundaries, but the big takeaway that I want for you to have today is that you get to decide what you are and aren't okay with from a sexual physical perspective, and you get to set that boundary using informed consent around what you are and aren't okay with, what you've decided are your boundaries. I like to remind people that you want to play in a safe, sane, and consensual manner. So everyone is safe, everyone is of their right mind, and everyone is able to consent to what is happening. If all of those things are occurring, that is a really great foundation to build a relationship on. Sexual boundaries also are important to keep in mind when other people are asking you for information about your sexual experiences or about your sex life. You don't owe anyone that information. And that's where we go back to those sort of emotional, intellectual boundaries again, and we say, you know what? I get to decide who I share my emotion with, who I get to share my information with, and I don't have to just give that away. So not only are you engaging in safe, sane, consensual practices in your relationship, you're also consenting to who you share that information with, and not everyone gets access to that information. You'll want to tune in to the podcast this week. It'll be up on Thursday at 2 p.m. because we're going to dig into this so much more. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you're able to hear all of the information that's coming next. And then we're going to continue this journey through boundaries into the next few weeks as we start talking about material, money, and time boundaries. And you may actually find that there's more overlap, not just with the other ones we've talked about, but also the sexual ones. Until next time, keep living your best life, and I'll be back with more.